Good morning, students. Welcome to section 2.2/2.3, and in this video, we'll introduce conditional statements. So just like in science, we have statements written in the form if and then. So the if part is called the hypothesis, and then part is called the conclusion. So let's take a look at one example. If an animal is a cow, then it has 4 legs, okay? So this part is called the hypothesis, and then the second part is called the conclusion. So in this lesson, I will teach you how to write conditional statements, converse, inverse, and a contrapositive. And then in class, we'll discuss whether the statements are true or false. So example number 1, write the following conditional statement and as a conditional statement and identify the hypothesis and conclusion. So two angles whose measures are up to 100 degrees are supplements. So that's the statement we gave you, and now we would like to write this in if and then form. Okay, I'll try to type it. So it will be if two angles have measures that are up to 180 degrees, then they are supplements. Okay. If you want, you can pause this video and take a minute and try example B. So every student at Simsbury High School has a locker. So I can write this using if, I gotta put text box. If a student exists at SHS, then they have a locker. Just so you know, this statement, you can rewrite it in a different way. It doesn't have to be written exactly the way I did it, but I'm just trying to explain how to write this using if and then statement. Okay, now let's go to page 2. Forms of a conditional statement. So in mathematics, we typically use symbols. So notation, let P represent the hypothesis of a condition and Q represent the conclusion. So I can rewrite if P then Q, I can also write it P arrow Q, which technically means P implies Q. We can also negate this statement, and this little symbol, okay, means not. So this means we're going to negate the statement, which technically means not P. Conditional statements have converse, inverse, and contrapositive statements. And again, we will form them, and then we'll also decide whether they're true or false statements. And sometimes if they are false, we would like to provide a counter example, which is one example that makes the statement false. Okay, again, let's look at this example. The conditional statement is, if an animal is a bird, then it has feathers. Okay, so the hypothesis is animal is a bird, and the conclusion is it has feathers. So converse, how do we form converse? Converse, we switch if and then. Okay, so the converse of this statement is if an animal has feathers, then it is a bird. Okay, so again, converse, we switch if and then. Okay, it should be animal, not animals. If an animal, okay. Now, how about inverse? If you look at the notation over here, inverse is not P implies not Q. So basically, we are negating the conditional statement. So the conditional statement was, if an animal is a bird, then it has feathers. So now I am going to negate the original statement. So the negation is, if an animal is not a bird, then it does not have feathers. Okay, and finally, we are going to create a contrapositive, and contrapositive is in the form not Q implies not P. Please remember, Q was the hypothesis and P was the, excuse me, Q was the conclusion and P was the hypothesis. So in other words, I am negating the converse. Okay, so maybe one, let me just write it down and then I'll try to explain it. Okay, so I am going to write, if an animal does not have feathers, then it is not a bird. You probably wonder whether the statements are true or false. You can think about it, but in class we'll discuss it. I would like to take a minute and try to kind of show you. So conditional statement, P implies Q. Converse would be Q implies P. Inverse, okay, I am negating the conditional statement. So that will be not P implies not Q. And contrapositive, I'm not going to spell it, it will be negation of the converse, which would be not Q implies not P. So the way I remember this is they kind of go together, and the third and fourth, they will go together. Okay. What I would like you to do is try example number 2, maybe on your own. Okay. And then pause the video and see how you did. Again, your statements do not have to be written exactly the way I do it, but they should be really, really close. So I have a statement. A midpoint divides a segment into two congruent parts. Okay, so I am going to rewrite this statement in if and then form. If a point is a midpoint, then it divides segment into two congruent parts. Okay, so this is my conditional statement. Converse, I'm going to switch if and then. So the converse is, if a point divides a segment, oh, something happened. Okay, so if a point divides a segment into two congruent parts, then it is a midpoint. Inverse, we are going to negate the conditional statement. So the inverse will be if a point is not a midpoint, then it does not okay. And finally, contrapositive. So the contrapositive, I am going to negate the converse. So the contrapositive is if a point okay. So check your work. Hopefully you did it correctly. And I think finally we will practice one more example. So last example is another geometry statement. And the sentence I have for you is, if an angle measures 67 degrees, then it is an acute angle. And by the way, I'm going to ask you, is this statement true or false? What do you think? The answer is this statement is true. If an angle measures 67 degrees, then by definition, it is an acute angle. Okay? So the converse is if an angle is acute, then, how do you spell acute? Then it measures 67 degrees. Okay, try to form the inverse. The inverse of the statement will be if an angle okay. So the inverse would be if an angle does not measure 67 degrees, then it is not acute. And finally, a contrapositive, we are going to negate the converse. Okay, so if an angle is not acute, then it does not measure 67 degrees. So again, the objective of this video was to really introduce if and then conditional statements, and based on this video, you should be able to write the conditional statement, converse, inverse, and contrapositive, and then in class, we will discuss true or false statement, and we'll continue. Thank you for watching this video. Have a good day.